which probably does not correspond to his time in the marathon. But we will hear more about that. When you hear the word Chicago, what comes to mind? The musical entitled Chicago, the Windy City, O'Hare Airport, the place where True North and Magnetic North are the same, deep dish pizza. Today, Craig has something else in mind to talk about. Please help me welcome him with his speech titled Chicago.
There are 6 large major marathons in the world called the World Marathon Majors, or just the majors. Pay attention because I may quiz you on this later. There are 3 in the US, Chicago, New York, Boston. The other 3 are London, Berlin, and Tokyo. After you run all 6 marathons, majors, you get a medal that's a huge medal that has all 6 marathons on it. What a prize. Before I met Hay, I had run 25 marathons, most of them, almost all of them under 3 hours and 30 minutes. Each marathon was fast enough to qualify for any of these 6 majors. I have run 6 or 8 marathons after meeting Hay, and only one was under 4 hours at 3 hours and 58 minutes. I guess I would say that I had more important things to do after I met Hay. This sub 4 hour marathon time was fast enough to qualify for any of these 6 major marathons. Hay and I both registered to run the 2020 Chicago Marathon a year ago. It was deferred or canceled until this year, October 10th. I'm going to break this speech into 2 parts, pre-Chicago and Chicago. As I compose the pre-Chicago portion of this speech, the marathon is 5 days away. 12 days earlier, Hay and I ran our last long 20-mile run in preparation for the Chicago Marathon. We found a flat 10-mile stretch of trail to simulate the flat Chicago Marathon. This is a trail along Highway 24 from Peyton to Falcon, about 10 miles long, so out and back 20 miles. I was 5 miles into this 20-mile run when I tripped over a little tiny board on this bridge and went down hard. I knew I was okay though when Hay stopped and came over and said, "You're fine. Get up and keep running." Maybe you're wondering why I wear gloves. It's called skid protection. We began our taper 12 days ago, which means that we cut down on the volume or quantity of running. We plan to fly into Chicago on Friday. Saturday, we'll go pick up our bibs at the expo, run the marathon on Sunday, and Monday we'll return home. We plan to take advantage of our high altitude extra red blood cells when we run Chicago at an elevation of 700 feet. It feels like we are just in a holding pattern, just waiting day after day, just waiting for the race to begin. Some would say the hardest part in running a marathon is just signing up for the race. I think the hardest part is just waiting for the race to begin. October 10th, race day. Hay and I arrive at the starting area an hour and a half before my race begins. I brought a plastic trash bag to lay down on the grass so that I could sit down and keep dry before the race. So I laid down and I waited and I waited. My start time was 7:30 a.m. I went to my corral E, at 7:05. I talked to a race official. I talked to a couple of the runners while I waited. Finally, at 7:30 a.m., the gun went off and the race began. I did the accordion walk. I walked, stopped, walked, stopped, walked, stopped for 20 minutes before I crossed the starting line. It was already 70 degrees and it would be close to 80 degrees when I finished the race. The humidity was 65%. The day before, we got an email from the race official stating the condition was yellow for the race. And by later in the morning, it would be red, meaning that it could potentially be dangerous to run a marathon. I began the race at a moderate pace, knowing that I have a hard time running in the heat. To give you an idea of how moderate this pace was, I've run 5 half marathons in the past year, and the times range from 1 hour and 44 minutes to 1 hour and 55 minutes. The heat was already starting to affect me. I was slowing down as I crossed the half marathon timing mat at 2 hours and 12 minutes. I was running by feel, what just felt comfortable. I didn't look at my watch. I just knew I had a long way to go. As my body warmed up, each mile got progressively slower. My mind remained clear, however, as I frequently cheered on the spectators, telling them, "You look great." Of course, they would smile and look back and say, "You look great," even though I was probably dragging by then. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. I concentrated on just finishing the next mile. It took me over an hour to complete the last 3 miles of the race, shuffling and staggering when I couldn't shuffle anymore. I noticed that other runners were walking at this time. I couldn't shuffle fast enough to keep up with those runners. I could, however, shuffle faster than I could stagger. Whenever I tried to walk, I was just really all over the place. To put this in perspective, I'm sure each of you could actually walk 3 miles in less than 45 minutes. And it took me over an hour. As long as I could smile and wave, the numerous medical personnel left me alone. About 1.5 miles from the race finish, one of these medical professionals asked me if I was okay. I said, yes. He said, "Can I get you anything?" And I said, yes, a finish line. I was hurting. At 400 meters from the finish line, I staggered by up this slight incline past a large group of medical professionals. I smiled and waved, and I told them I was savoring the moment as I continued to put one foot in front of the other. When I finally staggered across the finish line, 2 men rushed over to support me. As soon as they could tell my mind was okay, they handed me over to a couple of young women who supported me, let me sit down in a wheelchair for a few minutes, and walked me very slowly a half mile through the finishing area. I'm so grateful for these 2 young women. I slowly walked the remaining 3/10 of a mile to the hotel. When I arrived at the hotel room and opened the door, I was greeted by a huge smile from Hay, who had already been back to the room, cleaned up, eaten, and taken a nap. I've completed the Chicago Marathon. Yes! I have now run Boston, New York, Chicago, and Berlin. And I'm signed up to run the Tokyo Marathon in 2023.